June 7, 2026, 0300 hours. A Russian logistics officer at Chonhar checks his manifest and marks the route secure. 6 hours later, that bridge, the only road link between Crimea and the southern front, is burning. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which drone Ukraine used to turn a hardened concrete bridge into a choke point Russia can no longer trust, why the Kremlin's own alternate route became a second trap within days, and the one tactical shift, confirmed by open-source analysts geolocating the wreckage, that changed how Russia moves fuel to its entire southern front. This isn't speculation, this is pieced together from military statements, OSINT verification, and satellite confirmation. And it starts with a bridge most people have never heard of, connecting a peninsula Russia cannot afford to lose.
Look at a map of southern Ukraine and you'll find a strip of land so narrow it barely qualifies as land at all, a spit of earth and asphalt called Chonhar, stitching occupied Crimea to the Ukrainian mainland. For 3 years, it has been one of Russia's most important pieces of infrastructure in the entire war. Not because it's impressive, it isn't. It's a modest road and rail bridge over a shallow strait, but it is one of only a handful of physical connections between Crimea, Russia's naval anchor in the Black Sea, and the front lines in Zaporizhia and Kherson. Every artillery shell, every fuel tanker, every replacement soldier headed to the 37th Motor Rifle Brigade's positions near Huliapole has, at some point, likely crossed this bridge or one of its 2 sister crossings at Armyansk and Henichesk. Cut all 3, and you don't just inconvenience a supply line, you potentially strangle it. For most of the war, Ukraine's tools for hitting a target like this were limited. HIMARS could reach it, but Russia adapted, spacing out convoys and hardening key structures. Sabotage worked occasionally, but couldn't be repeated at scale. What Ukraine needed was something that could fly low, fly far, hit precisely, and be cheap enough to send in swarms. That's where the story actually begins, not on June 7th, but months earlier in workshops and testing fields where Ukrainian engineers were quietly solving a problem that would define the summer offensive. The answer came in the form of what analysts now call mid-range strike drones, a new category sitting between small first-person view quadcopters that can barely cross the front line and the long-range strategic drones Ukraine uses to hit refineries deep inside Russia. Ukraine's Firepoint drones and the newer Behemoth UAV fall into this bracket. The Behemoth, styled loosely on the Iranian-designed Shahed airframe Russia itself has weaponized against Ukrainian cities, can carry 2 warheads and reach roughly 300 kilometers, far enough to hit almost anything behind the entire southern front, low enough to slip under a lot of Russian radar coverage, and cheap enough that losing a few in a strike doesn't bankrupt the program. This is the pattern interrupt worth pausing on. Why does flying low matter so much against a country with one of the densest air defense networks on Earth? Russian radar systems are optimized to catch fast, high-altitude threats, fighter jets, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles skimming at a few hundred meters. A slow-moving drone hugging terrain at 50 meters or less produces a radar return that's easy to lose in ground clutter. It's not invisible, it's just statistically more likely to get ignored by an operator scanning a screen full of noise, especially at 4 a.m., especially when a dozen decoy drones are doing the same thing 30 kilometers away. By early June, Ukraine's first. This is the strategic insight most coverage skips. You don't need to drop a bridge into the water to make it useless. You just need to make the people driving fuel tankers across it afraid to. On the Russian side, the response was procedural, almost bureaucratic, and that's exactly what made it vulnerable. Local occupation officials began publicly acknowledging bridge damage days before Ukraine confirmed anything, first admitting the crossing had been hit, then quietly rerouting civilian bus traffic and citing fuel shortages. That kind of public scrambling is a tell. It means the alternate plan wasn't ready. It means somebody in the logistics chain is now improvising in real time, and improvisation under drone coverage is exactly the kind of mistake OSINT analysts live for. What happened next is the part most after-action summaries leave out entirely, because it isn't about the bridge at all. It's about where the trucks went when the bridge stopped being safe. When the Chonhar route became unreliable, Russian logistics planners didn't have many options. There's a second route, further west, running through a town called Armyansk. It's the kind of route that exists specifically for moments like this, the pressure valve you open when the primary line gets cut. Within days, Ukrainian drone units and their reconnaissance partners had confirmed something predictable but still remarkable. Trucks were backing up there too. Analysts monitoring open-source geolocation channels reported roughly 50 vehicles gathered at one point near Armyansk, sitting still, waiting, which is precisely the kind of mid-range strike drone is built for. A moving convoy is hard to hit efficiently. A stationary one, bottlenecked at a single choke point because its first route just got bombed, is a battlefield analyst's dream and a Russian logistics officer's nightmare. This is the first countermeasure defeated, not through brute force, but through denial. Ukraine didn't need to guess where Russia's alternate route. That's the specificity bomb worth pausing on. Right here in the zone most competitor videos go flat. Military analysts tracking the campaign noted freight traffic across the Chonhar crossing had dropped by roughly 71% within about 2 weeks of the intensified strikes, according to figures cited by Robert Brovdy, the commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces. That's not a rounding error. That's a supply line operating at less than 1/3 of capacity for a front line that measures its ammunition and fuel needs in tons per day, not per week. Here's the detail that almost never makes it into the coverage. This entire campaign has a name inside Ukraine's own command structure, a middle strike doctrine, aimed specifically at the zone between 20 and 200 kilometers behind the front line. It's not improvisation, it's policy. Ukraine's own defense leadership has described the objective in stark terms, a full logistics lockdown, designed so that Russian forces feel unsafe moving supplies even far from the fighting itself. Which raises the obvious tactical question, why now? Why did this campaign accelerate through the summer of 2026 specifically? The answer sits in the wider strategic picture. Russia had been building toward a summer offensive push in the south, and defensive pushes live or die on sustainment, fuel for armor, ammunition for artillery, replacement troops for units bleeding casualties in a stalemated, grinding fight. Cutting the arteries feeding that offensive before it fully launches is far more efficient than trying to stop tanks once they're already moving. This is the payoff ladder paying off. First, the bridge itself, then the alternate route, then the wider realization that the entire operational tempo of an offensive can be blunted before a single armored column crosses the line of departure. Second countermeasure, second failure. Russian occupation authorities tried quietly shifting some traffic to rail instead of road, using the Kerch-Jankoy line, until footage geolocated in mid-June showed that route burning too. A railway bridge struck in what was at the time an unconfirmed but visually consistent overnight drone attack, fire visible against the dark water below. By this point, a pattern is undeniable, and it's the kind of pattern that should genuinely unsettle a military planner. Every fallback Russia reaches for is being watched, and watched in something close to real time, by a distributed network of drone operators, satellite analysts, and open-source investigators cross-referencing telegram footage against known coordinates within hours of an attack. The old advantage of numerical superiority, more trucks, more routes, more redundancy, collapses when every one of those routes is visible, and every convoy that bunches up becomes a target the moment it stops moving. Before the decisive strike on the main crossing could even be confirmed, one more system activated that Russian planners hadn't fully priced in: coordination. This wasn't a single drone unit acting alone. It was the first separate assault battalion, working directly alongside a specialized.
By the time the dust from the Chonhar strike settled, the outcome wasn't a single dramatic explosion toppling a bridge into the strait. That's the Hollywood version, and it's not what actually happened, and honestly, it didn't need to happen that way to work. The real outcome was quieter and, in a strategic sense, more devastating. A bridge that Russia could still technically use, but no longer trusted. Convoys slowed, loads got smaller, spread across more trips to reduce the cost of any single strike. Fuel and lubricant shipments meant for the 37th Motor Rifle Brigade. The unit commander Dmytro Filatov, callsign Perun, specifically identified as a target of the operation, had to be rerouted, delayed, or risked anyway under drone coverage that had already proven it could find and hit a moving target near that crossing. This is the strike's real kill chain, and it's worth stating plainly because it's the part that separates a good analysis from a superficial one. Destruction was never really the objective. Disruption was. A destroyed bridge gets photographed once and repaired eventually. A bridge under constant credible threat changes behavior every single day it remains standing. Slower convoys, smaller loads, more fuel burned on longer alternate routes, more soldiers pulled from combat units to guard infrastructure instead of holding the line. Every one of those costs compounds. None of them show up in a single dramatic headline. All of them show up, eventually, in a front line that can't be adequately supplied when it matters most. And that's the closed loop from the top of this video. The jamming and detection question: how did Russia fail to intercept drones flying repeated passes at a fixed, defended target? The honest answer is that Russia didn't fully fail. Some drones were shot down. Electronic warfare did disrupt some runs. But mid-range strike drones are cheap enough and launched in high enough numbers. The convoy commander's fatal call, the decision most viewers assumed would be some singular dramatic error, was in reality a structural one made long before any individual driver got behind the wheel. Keeping a single peninsula dependent on 3 physical crossings in an era when those crossings can be watched, geolocated, and struck by systems costing a fraction of what they're built to protect. And the detail that changed how Russia escorts convoys since? It's not a piece of shrapnel or a fragment of wreckage, it's the traffic pattern itself. Occupation authorities now routinely stagger and disperse loads, avoid daylight movement near known strike zones, and treat every bridge behind the southern front as a target under active surveillance rather than a secured rear area asset. That shift in posture, confirmed by the same open-source analysts tracking the strikes, is the campaign's most lasting effect. More lasting in strategic terms than any single bridge's physical condition on any single day. If this campaign has a natural next chapter, it's the electronic warfare fight sitting underneath all of it. The jamming systems, the decoys, and the handful of intercepts that very nearly stopped strikes like this one before they ever reached their targets. That's the video where the story shifts from bridges and convoys to the invisible battle over the radio spectrum itself, and it's a story most channels haven't touched yet because it requires actually understanding how these systems fail, not just that they sometimes do.